Ah, 2002, when Marvel movies could just be good movies that didn't have to set up a string of universes and spin-offs and sequels. Welcome to my series of Spider-Man reviews. I'm going to be reviewing every single Spider-Man film, including updated thoughts on The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, leading up to Civil War this year. And to start it off, we're going to be talking about the original Spider-Man film, directed by Sam Raimi, came out in 2002, stars Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, and Willem Dafoe. In the year 2001, I personally did not have the internet at my house, and so I didn't really know about movie news or anything, and I was only about 13 years old, so I was just sort of getting into the idea of movies and discovering my passion for film. I had loved movies my whole life, but it wasn't really until my teenage years that I really decided I wanted to study them and learn more about filmmaking. And so when I was sitting in a theater in 2001 and I saw a preview for Spider-Man, I lost my mind. I grew up loving this character. I loved the comics, I loved the 90s television show, I even watched the 80s cartoon, and I watched the 60s cartoon. It's a very funny cartoon to rewatch. A lot of times Spider-Man spins his webs by going like this. He just makes a fist. He doesn't do the famous whoosh. He like goes whoosh. Sorry. I mean, I even watched the live action show that only ran for like one season. The music for that show was so 1970s. I love listening to it every once in a while just for a laugh. My parents will tell you that I used to crawl face first down the stairs saying, "Hey, look at me, I'm Spider-Man." Spider-Man was a big thing for me, and so going into this movie in 2002, my mind, I was there, I was ready, I was pumped. It's one of the first times that I can recall actually going to a theater and having a difficult time finding a seat. It was packed. Spider-Man, as some of you may know, was at the time the highest grossing weekend of all time. I think it made something like $114 million. It was humongous. It was the first movie to ever gross $100 million in one weekend. That's including inflation. So as an adult, it was really interesting to go back and rewatch the film because my goal in rewatching it was not just to look for the fun things I remember when I was 14 years old and my teenage years of loving this movie. I wanted to analyze the filmmaking and really look at how Sam Raimi directed this movie, and I was really impressed with what he did. Something I love about this movie is that it really actually does hold up fairly well. Yes, it is cheesy, and yes, at times it is a little bit Power Ranger-y, especially with Green Goblin's suit. But this is also based off a comic book in which a man is bitten by a radioactive spider and then gets spider powers and gets to spin webs and climb around the buildings. So, you know, not everything has to be dark and gritty. In fact, that's what I love about Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film. It is gleefully fun. It's one of the very few delightful superhero films. Most superhero films now are so obsessed with being really dark and just, oh, everything's sad. I loved rewatching this movie and experiencing a movie that was just extremely happy and very fine with being happy. Because if you go back and read the initial 1960s comics, I mean, they're cheesy as hell. And Raimi is a humongous comic book fan. He has a collection of thousands. From what I understand, he has like over 25,000 comic books. So the guy knows the feel, he knows the world. And that was something that Spider-Man, this first film, really accomplished well. It set up a world that did feel mostly real and grounded, mainly because our characters are so well fleshed out, and the casting is almost perfect. As far as I'm concerned, I have not yet seen Civil War, but Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker is definitely the best Peter Parker we've had. He really captures that nerdiness. You feel such sympathy for him, and Raimi did a really good job of setting up the introduction to his character. As the camera pans through the bus and we see Mary Jane, we see Flash Thompson, we see the kid with the jelly donut, and then we get to pan to Peter, and everyone's laughing at him, and no one wants to support him except MJ. Even the bus driver is laughing at him. Now that is stretching it a little bit, because you may not know, before I started trying to make a career out of film criticism, I worked on school buses with handicapped kids, and so I know for a fact that no bus driver would ever be like, "Ha ha, stupid nerd, you're dumb. Yeah, see you later, kid. I'm gonna get fired later." But this movie just did such a great job of setting up all of its characters in those opening scenes. And Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin / Norman Osborn is some of the best casting I've ever seen. I can't really think of anyone else playing this character. He nailed it. And what I loved about his portrayal of Norman Osborn is what went on behind the scenes. If you watch the making of documentary of Spider-Man and read up on the production of the film, which I have, he really lobbied for this role. Sam Raimi wasn't going to cast him initially, but he kept pestering him about it. He wanted to be the Green Goblin, and not just because he knew it would help him become more famous. I mean, the guy was already in movies like Platoon. He didn't need more fame. He wanted to play this character, and you can feel it in the role. He's really passionate about this source material. He even had the costume team remake the entire costume so that he could perform the majority of the stunt work himself, and he did do about 90 to 95% of the stunts in this movie, and I gotta respect him for that. Another thing I loved rewatching it is Danny Elfman's score. Still, after two other people trying to do the score, James Horner, rest in peace, and Hans Zimmer, none of them were able to equal what Danny Elfman did with this movie. His score is still very catchy, and it has this great sense of adventure and epic weight to it all. A reason that I think Raimi was such a good choice for director of this film is that he is notoriously a very good in-camera director. Because of his work on the Evil Dead films, the guy knows low-budget filmmaking. The guy is used to making films without a lot of CGI support. And not to downgrade CG, I know CG has its place in film. This film is actually remarkably in-camera quite often. Something else this movie did so well was set up conflict between characters. Harry Osborn, played very well by James Franco, clearly has some jealousy in regards to Peter and Norman, because Norman seems to respect Peter more because he's smarter and he can do things that Harry can't do very well. Now, something this movie gets made fun of a lot for is the whole Mary Jane and Peter Parker crush thing, and that it's a little too cutesy. Look, I can tell you, and this is a little bit of personal information about me, but I don't mind sharing it. When this movie came out, I had like the biggest crush on this girl I knew. I mean, massive. I'm telling you, when I saw this movie, I was like, that is it. If you've ever had a deep, terrible, just horrible crush on somebody and you were too nervous to explain how you felt to that individual, I understand that feeling, and I really think this movie portrayed it very well, actually. And I think Kirsten Dunst did a great job as Mary Jane Watson because the script also fleshed her out really well. She has this abusive father. Her home life is terrible. She wants to be more serious in her life and become an actress, but she also has this side of her that instantly turns into the fun girl whenever she sees Flash Thompson. After Peter and MJ have this really nice conversation outside their house about their dreams, as soon as Flash Thompson pulls up with his new car, she turns on that persona of I'm just the fun girl instantaneously because she's used to using that as a defense mechanism. And I know I'm looking super deep into Spider-Man, but really, you should. It's a film made by people, and they really try to flesh out these characters really well. And I was super excited rewatching Spider-Man to actually realize as an adult, this film holds up really well. It has great character depth, really fun action scenes, beautiful direction. Sam Raimi really honored the character of Spider-Man. You gotta also remember when this movie came out, recently the only comic book hit we had was X-Men. The Batman films had been crushed by Joel Schumacher's last two films. Blade was really good, but it wasn't like a massive success or anything. What they did with Spider-Man was they said, hey, this can be a thing. Let's really go forth with this and see if we can make other characters, and now we're getting Ant-Man today. It's nuts. Again, with the casting, Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben. These two were fantastic, especially Cliff Robertson, his speech to Peter in the car right before he dies. It's heartbreaking. They nailed the with great power comes great responsibility scene, and it didn't seem forced or tacked on. It seemed absolutely necessary. So that later, when Uncle Ben is killed, that whole revenge sequence with Peter trying to chase down the shooter, it's riveting. It's actually really suspenseful and exciting still today. I'm not just looking at this movie like, oh, this is the thing I loved when I was a kid. I tried to shove all of that away, like I did with Return of the Jedi when I rewatched Return of the Jedi, and really just look at the movie and the way it's made, and I'm impressed. Now again, still on the casting, J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is maybe like top 5 casting choices of all time. This guy owned every second of film that he is in. No jobs, freelance, meat. I'll send you a nice box of Christmas meat. It's the best I can do. Get out of here. One of the major negatives that I hear a lot from Spider-Man's fans was that he wasn't quippy enough in this movie. He didn't make enough jokes. I actually think it's a good balance, because there are times, like in the fight with Randy Savage, he says,
"That's a cute outfit. Did your husband give it to you?"
Or when he's trying to make JJ shut up, he says,
"Hey kiddo, let mom and dad talk for a minute, will ya?"
The quips are there, but they don't override the story, and I think that's just what I need, because you can get to the point where you become an asshole and you're no longer just being funny and you're just being like a dick. And I think they found the right boundary, at least for myself. Maybe some fans had wanted a little bit more of that. I like that Spider-Man has organic web shooters in this movie because, for one thing, it makes sense. If he gets all the powers of a spider, why shouldn't he be able to spin webs? And the other thing is, it's more realistic because this kid is a dirt poor high schooler. He doesn't have a job. He has no money. There's no way that he could actually create web shooters. It's not going to happen. And so I think that was the wise choice. And I love this scene where he discovers his powers. It looks real. Like, it is real. It was like a set turned on its side. It looks great still to this day. When I was a kid, I used to crawl up the stairs. Dun, dun. That being said, he definitely should be more shocked by his body transformation when he looks in the mirror and he's like, I'm ripped all of a sudden. Yep, it's a big change, Aunt May. Yep, okay, whatever. And I love when he's first trying to figure out how to spin his webs. It's so funny.
Go, web! Fly! Up, up, and away, web! Shazam!
Another thing that I hear a lot is that Green Goblin just looks like a Power Ranger. You know, I liked the Power Rangers when I was a kid. Do they have a place in Spider-Man? Probably not. I'll give you that. It is a little silly. It is definitely a silly looking suit, but I like it a lot better than Dane DeHaan with face herpes. A lot more than that. Also, it's a complaint that just gets regurgitated. Somebody sees it somewhere and they go, oh, that's funny. And then they say it and then someone else says it and it becomes like a thing like that people have in their head because someone else said it and then they said it and they go, yeah, it's Power Ranger suit. That's the way the internet works. When this movie came out, the internet wasn't huge. Social media wasn't even around. Everyone loved this movie. And now the internet's more popular. Everyone talks about things and oh, Power Rangers, and now it's a thing. That's my little unnecessary rant on the Green Goblin Power Ranger comparison. Also, during the Unity Day parade scene, which I like to call the Macy Gray scene, there's a kind of stupid part where Green Goblin just has like a vaporizing bomb that turns people into skeletons. I just want to know how that thing works. Like, do you make a circle, like this circumference, these people become skeletons? It was obviously just like, we don't want to show Green Goblin murder all these people, so we'll make them vaporize. Raimi also did something really cool with colors in this movie, like the dinner scene. Peter is actually wearing the Green Goblin's colors. Norman is wearing Spider-Man's colors, and Harry is wearing both of their colors. Not that that really matters, it's just cool that they did that. It's like, you know, they weren't just filming the scene. They actually thought about cool little things they could throw in there for the fans. And what I've always loved about the finale of this movie is how brutal it is. Spider-Man gets his ass kicked. He's bleeding from his face. The Goblin is tearing the shit out of him. And that's another reason I love that Raimi directed this movie, because he really has this visceral sense to the way he cuts films together. And it looks very realistic. It's all in camera. These are people flying around, getting smacked into walls. Obviously, it's prop walls and everything, but it's not some CGI guy flying around. It looks real. I'll never forget sitting in the theater with my mom in 2002 and her actually closing her eyes. And my mom watches a lot of stuff. We grew up watching The X-Files and gross creature, gory, bloody stuff. So, like, you know, she's not like that kind of woman. She was like, oh, man. And I just looked over and I was like, Spider-Man, yeah, good job. Like, I love that. I love the fact that this movie wasn't just some kiddie fest. It was, at times, not afraid to get violent. The issues that I have with Spider-Man are largely just little tiny gripes and nitpicks. Certain things that could have been fleshed out a little more, maybe some things that are rushed, but I recognize that as a film that is really trying to tribute the comics of the 60s while also kind of melding a little bit with the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, they did a really good job of doing that. I love Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, not just because I grew up with it. I specifically watched this film looking for flaws, and while there are some of them there, I think they did an excellent job, especially considering the time period this movie came out. I'm going to give Spider-Man an A-. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I am going to be covering Spider-Man 2 very soon. You guys are the best. Seriously, thank you very much for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.